Located inland in West Africa, Burkina Faso has a long and rich history. In the lengthy pre-colonial era, this land nurtured a variety of early cultures and witnessed the rise of the powerful Mossi Kingdom. As early as 14,000 BCE, Paleolithic hunter-gatherers were active in the area. Stone tools made by them were discovered in the northwest of the country. From 3600 BCE to 2600 BCE, human settlements increasingly appeared, marking the dawn of agricultural civilization. From the 3rd to the 13th century CE, southeastern Burkina Faso was covered by the early Iron Age Bura culture. From south of the capital Ouagadougou to the southwest border with Niger, a series of Bura cultural sites have been excavated. The large number of pottery, ironware, and other artifacts unearthed testified to the metallurgical and agricultural advancements of the time. The Bura culture continued in the region for nearly 1,000 years, greatly promoting the development of local society. From the 8th to the 15th century, with the great migrations of ancient West African ethnic groups, waves of peoples entered Burkina Faso. They came from the north, east, and south, converging in the Volta River basin, bringing new cultures, technologies, and beliefs. Among them, the most important were the Mossi people. Around the 11th century, the Mossi migrated in and settled. Over the following centuries, they gradually established several powerful kingdoms. According to oral histories passed down locally, the brave and warlike Mossi people originally came from the Mande region on the eastern bank of the Niger River. A legendary figure named Ouedraogo led his people on a long migration and ultimately established the first Mossi state in Tenkodogo. Archaeological evidence indicates that Tenkodogo was already a political center in the 11th century. Later, Ouedraogo's descendants established kingdoms in Yatenga, Sandoma, Gourma, and other places. The most powerful of these was the kingdom centered in the present-day capital, Ouagadougou. The Mossi kingdom was a highly hierarchical society. The hereditary king, the Mogonaba, ruled alongside local chiefs selected from the nobility. The king and nobles held political power, while commoners and slaves were at the bottom of society. However, in the spiritual realm, land priests, known as Tengaba, presided over local affairs. Even the Mogonaba had to respect their authority. This form of separation between religious and political powers was rare in West Africa at the time. During the Mossi Kingdom period, agriculture developed significantly. People cultivated millet, sorghum, and other crops, and domesticated cattle, sheep, and other livestock. Iron manufacturing flourished. Artisans smelted iron ore into weapons and farming tools. Commerce was also active. The king increased wealth by controlling trade. The annual Ramadan market attracted merchants from across West Africa and became an important part of trans-Saharan trade. At that time, the Mossi Kingdom was a regional power in West Africa, alongside the Mali and Songhai empires. Despite frequent contact with Islam, the Mossi retained their traditional religious beliefs. They worshipped ancestors and nature spirits and recorded history through oral tradition. This adherence to tradition allowed Mossi culture to be preserved intact. It was not until the late 19th century that the Mossi Kingdom was conquered by French colonialists through force. Yet its glorious history and heroic spirit of resistance are forever etched in the memory of the Burkinabe people. In the mid-20th century, the African continent was swept by a mighty nationalist movement. In this wave, the people of Burkina Faso also began their struggle for freedom and dignity. After World War II, nationalist sentiment in Burkina Faso, then called Upper Volta, reached unprecedented heights. Many intellectuals and political activists began to question the legitimacy of French colonial rule. In 1946, France enacted the Overseas Territories Act, allowing Africans to participate in local governance, but the impact was minimal. People across the country formed political parties and launched strikes and protests, demanding the abolition of forced labor and the reduction of excessive taxes. The call for national independence grew louder. Among the political parties, the most notable was the African Democratic Rally of Upper Volta, REDIA, founded in 1946. It quickly expanded and had over 100,000 members nationwide. Its leader, Maurice Yamiogo, took anti-colonial struggle as his mission and advocated Pan-Africanism, winning widespread support. He denounced French atrocities in Africa on international occasions, especially within the non-aligned movement, and called for self-determination rights for colonies. In September 1958, French President Charles de Gaulle proposed establishing a French community and urged African colonies to join it for autonomy, but this was strongly opposed by patriotic parties such as the REDIA. In November of that year, Yamiogo led Upper Volta to withdraw from the French community and declared the founding of the Republic of Upper Volta. In October of the following year, the National Assembly passed a new constitution, clearly establishing Upper Volta as a sovereign and independent republic. On August 5, 1960, Upper Volta officially gained full independence, and Yamiogo became the first president. After independence, Burkina Faso faced many political, economic, and social challenges. As a landlocked country, it lagged far behind coastal nations in infrastructure. In the early years of independence, there were only 2 secondary schools and 1 teacher training college nationwide, and the illiteracy rate was as high as 90%. Medical conditions were also poor, with an average life expectancy of only 35 years. To develop the national economy, the Yamiogo government implemented several reforms, including land reform, increased investment in agriculture, and restrictions on imported goods. While these reforms achieved some success, they also triggered political turmoil. On the morning of January 3, 1966, Chief of Staff Sangoulé Lamizana launched a coup and arrested President Yamiogo. Conflicts between the military and civilians, as well as internal divisions, plunged the young republic into decades of turbulence. The ideals and aspirations at the time of independence gradually turned into illusions. It was not until the late 20th century that Burkina Faso returned to the path of constitutional democracy. The independence process of Burkina Faso is a microcosm of Africa's anti-colonial struggle. It reflects a nation's relentless pursuit of freedom and a country's resilient will to progress through adversity. Despite the difficulties, the people of Burkina Faso have never abandoned their belief in independence. Today, as we look back on that history, we feel even more deeply the importance of national self-reliance. Only by remembering the struggles of our forebears can Burkina Faso create a better future. At the beginning of its independence, Burkina Faso was full of hope and ideals, but quickly fell into political turmoil. In the following decades, the country experienced multiple military coups and changes of power, repeatedly frustrating the development of democratic politics. On January 3, 1966, Chief of Staff Sangoulé Lamizana staged a coup and overthrew Yamiogo's government and ended the First Republic of independent Burkina Faso. Lamizana dissolved the parliament, banned political parties, and implemented military rule. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso entered a 14-year period of military government. Though Lamizana's regime restored social order, it failed to address the country's core problems. He attempted to revive the economy through a 3-year development plan, but with little success. At the same time, the military government's restrictions on civil liberties and political rights sparked widespread discontent. Students, workers, and civil servants took to the streets, demanding the restoration of constitutional governance. Faced with growing democratic demands, Lamizana was forced to compromise. In June 1970, a referendum reinstated a civilian government in Burkina Faso, but real power remained in the military hands. In the 1970s, the most influential social force in Burkina Faso was the National Confederation of Workers. It was not only the country's largest labor organization, but also a leading force against military rule. Leaders like Joseph.
Amid growing pressure, Lamizana was eventually forced to step down on November 25, 1980. On that day, Colonel Sai Zerbo launched a coup and overthrew Lamizana's regime. He formed the Military Committee for National Recovery, promising a return to democracy and clean governance. But in the eyes of democratic forces like the National Confederation of Workers, this was just another military ploy. They launched even larger protests, demanding a complete end to military rule. Under popular pressure, Zerbo resigned within 2 years. However, his successor, Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo, was also unable to escape the fate of military rule. In yet another coup in 1983, he was overthrown by Captain Thomas Sankara. Sankara is the most legendary figure in Burkina Faso's history. This poor but ambitious young officer won massive public support with his radical political ideals and personal charisma. He sought to use revolutionary means to transform Burkina Faso into a modern nation that was self-reliant and free from foreign control. However, his idealism was ultimately crushed by harsh realities. On October 15, 1987, he was assassinated in a bloody coup led by his close ally, Blaise Compaoré, at the age of just 38. Sankara's death marked the end of the Burkinabe Revolution. The regime Compaoré, established under the People's Democratic Front, implemented some democratic reforms but remained essentially a continuation of military rule. It wasn't until 2014 that Compaoré was finally ousted under massive public pressure. The decades of political turmoil following Burkina Faso's independence reflected the country's difficult quest for modernization. Frequent military coups were both the result of intensified power struggles among elites and revealed deep flaws in the political system. Time and again, military groups seized power in the name of democracy, but failed to fundamentally change the country's destiny. In the process, many brave individuals sacrificed their lives for constitutional democracy. Today, Burkina Faso continues to move forward amid turmoil, but its people's desire for freedom and democracy remains unwavering. This long-suffering country is writing its modern history through struggle. Since the start of the 21st century, Burkina Faso's political landscape has remained turbulent. The country faces both severe terrorist threats and popular demands for change. Despite the challenges, Burkina Faso is striving to forge a path to modernization that suits its national conditions. Blaise Compaoré, who came to power in 1987, served for 27 years, the longest term in the country's history. Early in his rule, he introduced rectification of the revolution, attempting to moderate the radical policies of the Sankara era by promoting national reconciliation and economic development. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso was once among the most stable countries in West Africa. However, his long-term rule led to serious problems. He repeatedly amended the constitution to eliminate presidential term limits and suppressed opposition. His inner circle controlled the country's political and economic life, while corruption ran rampant. At the same time, poverty and inequality worsened, fueling public discontent. In 2011, mass protests erupted, demanding Compaoré's resignation. Though he made concessions, his legitimacy was gone. In October 2014, Compaoré attempted to amend the constitution again to run in that year's presidential election, which enraged both the opposition and the people. On October 30th, as Parliament prepared to vote on the amendment, large crowds stormed and set fire to the National Assembly building, forcing the cancellation of the vote. Protesters occupied the streets, and Compaoré was forced to resign. He then dissolved the government and parliament and fled to Côte d'Ivoire. The military intervened and formed a transitional government, promising to hold democratic elections within a year. After Compaoré stepped down, Burkina Faso entered a new political process. In September 2015, the transitional government enacted a new constitution limiting the president to one re-election. On November 29, Burkina Faso held its first free and democratic elections in 30 years. Former Prime Minister Marc Christian Kaboré won the election, becoming the first president of the Fifth Republic. The biggest challenge facing the Kaboré government was the worsening security situation. Since 2015, the northern and eastern parts of Burkina Faso have seen frequent terrorist attacks, causing heavy casualties among security forces and civilians. Extremist groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb expanded their influence in poorly governed border areas. Large numbers of people were displaced by fear, and economic development was severely damaged. In response to the crisis, the Kaboré government intensified anti-terrorism efforts and sought cooperation with neighboring countries. However, government incompetence and corruption led the anti-terror campaign into a mire. Public dissatisfaction with the ruling party grew. In January 2022, the military again launched a coup, overthrowing the Kaboré government. This coup highlighted Burkina Faso's governance crisis and signaled that the country will continue to move forward amid instability.